Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. We keep getting new patrons, and every time my phone dings and I see we have a new patron, I get super excited.
Yes, that's wonderful.
So we are looking for more patrons all the time. We have a monthly book club where we have a Zoom and we talk together. People submit questions, and then we talk about topics that are found outlined in my book. So it's excellent. It's a lot of fun.
It's wonderful.
We love our patrons.
Yes.
We do a monthly Q&A with some of our patrons, and we do an exclusive podcast once a month. Mm-hmm. So exciting stuff. Thank you guys. Thank you for making this podcast possible. You may or may not have heard of the 5 Midland, Texas officials who were arrested at Midland Christian School for failure to report abuse. That was a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And that's what we're going to talk about this
situated
episode.
here. Sorry, I can't get situated
you're
right.
You're going all crazy.
I'm wiggling
over here,
all
Granny.
over. I can't get
Now you know why I'm a fidgeter.
I can't get comfortable today. That's better.
Okay. So failure to report will get you jail time. And we want to talk about that and just talk about why that's so important. And the other thing, I think the thing is significant about this story is that there were 5 officials that were arrested all at once. Mm-hmm. Right. All 5 of them got arrested.
Right.
And I was asked by a couple of reporters, have you ever heard of that many people getting arrested at one time from one organization for failure to report? And I was going back all the way to Penn State University with Jerry Sandusky. Even then, that many people didn't get arrested for failure to report.
I'm intrigued. I'm baffled. I don't even know what to say about this because there were so many involved. They all knew about this. They all seemed to agree not to report. And it's like just crazy.
Well, I'll read some of this article.
Really
this is
crazy to me.
This is an NBC News article. The title of the article is 5 officials at Christian School in Texas charged with failing to report alleged sexual assault of student. 2 coaches and 3 administrators were arrested Wednesday and charged with failure to report with the intent to conceal, neglect, or abuse. 5 officials at a Christian school in Texas have been arrested and charged with failing to report the alleged sexual assault of a 9th grader that unfolded in the locker room during baseball practice, officials say. The faculty members, 2 coaches, and 3 administrators at Midland Christian School were arrested Wednesday and charged with failure to report with intent to conceal, neglect, or abuse. The 5 were Jared Lee, school superintendent, Dana Ellis, secondary school principal, Matthew Counts, secondary assistant principal, Gregory McClendon, athletic director and head football coach, and Barry Russell, baseball coach, according to an arrest affidavit obtained by NBC News. Now, this is what's fascinating to me, is that these aren't just teachers or teachers' aides.
That stuck out with me.
These were superintendents, principal, assistant principal, and 2 coaches. And all of them were charged not only with failure to report, but with intent to conceal, neglect, or abuse.
Right. When I read the article, like I said, I was kind of dumbfounded. I don't get it. I really don't get it until you break this down and wonder what goes through their minds. What would make you want to conceal this this kind of news? This it was horrible, horrific, the amount that we know of abuse that happened. And that's just what has been, put out there right now. I'm sure there was more, but the student reported it immediately.
Yeah, the day after. The day after it happened.
So, but it said they had corresponding emails between the administrators and the coaches all knowing about this. So they all knew about it. It just blows my mind, Jimmy. It really does, to think of why you would not pick the phone up and report it. Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Well,
Report it.
it makes no sense to me
No.
either. And Jared Lee, the superintendent, he knew about the abuse the day after, but
Right.
he told 2 other staff to, quote unquote, investigate, to do their own investigation. And we'll talk about this as this episode unfolds and why that's such a horrible idea. But, some of the facts are that Lee refused to show documents to police, and he refused to answer any questions by the police. Now, right off the bat, it shows that this guy, and this is, I guess it's some speculation, but some of that's just common courtesy. But this guy is, he's arrogant,
Yeah.
or he's desperately trying to hide something, as if the police aren't going to get a search warrant, which they did,
Right.
and they got their records anyway. So,
right.
that's a
But
big
did
fat
you
in
notice
your
that
face.
the records that they talked about were not dated until much later? Did you read that in the article?
Yeah.
Which they said
Which
at
means
first,
they fudged the
right?
dates on them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the whole thing is distressing. It's disappointing. It's a Christian school of all things. So,
And it's a Church of Christ
and it's
school.
a Church of Christ school.
So that's kind of, this has interest for me.
Right.
And
Right.
I recently did an interview with the Christian Chronicle. They've not released the story yet, so I can't talk a lot about what I said in my interview. But it was interesting talking to the reporter, because she said, you wouldn't believe the amount of hatred that we're getting for the first initial story that we printed, which basically just stated the facts, that this is what happened. And so here's some of the comments that I read personally, but I also heard from a reporter who said that there were some of these comments as well. Here's some of the comments that people are posting on this Christian news article that was posted. Well, here's one. People are innocent until proven guilty, so why even cover this story? Here's another comment. The Christian Chronicle is reporting fake news. I like that one.
Yeah.
What about the good teachers at Midland Christian? Why aren't you reporting on them? What about forgiveness?
Almost ridiculous, isn't it?
You're pointing fingers at these 5 officials, but what about forgiveness? You're not talking about that. Another one, mandated reporting laws are, quote unquote, man's law. What about following God's prescription for the offended party to go to the sinner first, according to Matthew 18? These are all regurgitated
I am just
responses.
shaking my head, because they're all, in my opinion, dumb responses. Sorry, dumb.
Yeah,
just
they
dumb
are.
responses coming from people who either don't understand this whole thing, or they just are in that position where, let's not even talk about this. If we don't talk about it, it goes away. And there are still a lot of people who believe that.
Yeah, point blank, the organization clearly is trying to save face and protect their own reputation. They're trying to clearly trying to hide things, which is why they were charged with intent to conceal, intent to conceal abuse. There's clear evidence in this affidavit that there was intentional covering up of abuse. Like, there's no question about that. And that's going to come out.
It
in
just
this
makes me
prosecution.
crazy, because in today's world, you would
There's no
have
excuse.
to be crazy to try to conceal evidence like
To
this.
think you're going to get away
Yes.
with it. Yeah.
Why would you do it?
Yeah.
I don't get it. I just do not get it.
Yeah.
I really do not.
Well, I want to walk through some of these comments because these are very typical. I was reading them and I'm like, these are all out of the same playbook. And, over and over and over, this is what we hear. So I want to talk about them. People are innocent until proven guilty, so why even cover this story? Well, because these leaders, supposed leaders, if you want to even call them that, do parents whose kids still attend that school, do they have a right to know that those leaders are going miles out of their way to cover up alleged abuse?
You got
Absolutely,
it.
they have a right
Yeah,
to know.
they have a right to know. They should know. It is all of our right to know
Absolutely.
that information. Yes.
So,
it is.
yeah, this whole innocent until proven guilty, that's in the court of law. That's not in practice. That's not just like if you witness somebody pull a gun out and just murder somebody right in front of you, would you or would you not try to protect people from that person?
Exactly.
If they're not in jail yet.
Exactly. Yes, of course.
Or
you
would you say,
of course
well,
you would. No.
I know what I saw, but I'm not going to talk
no.
about that because because really they're innocent until proven guilty. No, there were witnesses to this crime.
Right.
You have clear evidence, and by the way, if you didn't read the story, we'll link to it in the description. But this was bullying, physical bullying, punching, throwing this kid around.
They said they were screaming in the locker room.
Sexual
Yes.
assault with a baseball bat.
Yes.
And so I don't have to, hopefully I don't have to describe what's implicated in that. This was a brutal attack.
Right.
There is lots of evidence. Trust me on this. I know from talking to reporters, there's plenty of evidence. Heads are going to roll on this one. So this whole notion that people are innocent until proven guilty. So why would you even report on this story? Because clearly those people in power have no business being there, and they're not going to protect your kids at that school. So thank God for the media.
You're right.
Who write these stories to help protect other innocent people. This one is not even worth commenting on. The one that said the Christian Chronicle is reporting fake news. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's not even worth commenting on that. The stupidity of that. How about this one? What about the good teachers? Why not report on them? Because that's not part of the story.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant.
We know there are a lot of good teachers.
Nobody's saying there aren't good teachers at that school.
Yeah, that's not the point of any of this at all.
The point is there's a culture of cover-up.
Right.
This wasn't one person or two or three or four. This was 5 people.
It's shameful. It really is, Jimmy. When you think about it, it's terribly shameful that they would consider not saying something, not reporting immediately. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, there's a culture of cover-up at this school. There's not a question about that. Any one of those 4 other people could have overrode Jared Lee, the superintendent, and said, you know what? You can tell me till you're blue in the face. You can threaten to fire me if you want for not keeping this quiet. I'm a mandated reporter.
I will report.
I'm required to report it.
Exactly.
They should have gone to the police, regardless of any intimidation that might have been present by the superintendent.
It does make you think, are there other things they're covering up?
Probably.
Yeah, it really does. It makes your mind think, okay, why wouldn't you report immediately?
That's where my mind went, and I pictured the conversation going something like this. you really don't want to open this can of worms.
That's exactly how I pictured
by
the
reporting
conversation. Right.
Wink, wink.
Right. You remember when and we didn't report. You remember when this happened in the locker room and we didn't report. Do you want those parents jumping out and saying something?
Right.
And you could almost play out. And I'm sure there are people saying, well, we don't know this for a fact. No, but we can kind of let our minds wander there because there has to be a reason they would not report.
And not just not report, but to be completely non-compliant with law enforcement, to refuse to even talk to them.
Right.
Like, that's just, that's
else
bizarre.
is
That
being
screams
hidden?
that something is not right here.
Wow.
Because even if you wanted to play the ignorance card, well, I just didn't know, I was mandated reporter. I mean, even if the guy wanted to lie through his teeth,
we can't play that card anymore. It's all over.
But he went out of his way to arrogant. It almost sounds to me like it was this defiant, like, screw you, I'm not going to talk to you because you're law enforcement.
Right. Well, guess what?
And God bless those police officers because they got a search warrant right away and they came back. And,
yes, they did.
All right, fine. You don't want to talk? We'll let your emails do the talking.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that wasn't too pretty. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what happens, guys. If you don't report, I think we're past the days of the police officers that kind of wink and, give a wink and a nod. I think there are police officers out there who, like these in Midland, Texas, thank God for that police department.
But they genuinely care, and they are genuinely
doing
their jobs.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're doing their job.
They're genuinely doing their jobs. Yes, exactly right.
So here's another one. This other comment, what about forgiveness? This still blows my mind and gets me so fired up. I'm so tired of the F word. Forgiveness. I'm so tired. I'm just tired of hearing that word to where I cringe when I hear it. And I love forgiveness, but I cringe when I hear it because I'm like, forgiveness is always this default go-to where you turn it around really quickly. You put that on the shoulder of the victims and say, well, in other words, well, why doesn't this kid that had the baseball bat rammed in places that, it didn't belong, why doesn't he just forgive and, forget about it?
Move on.
How about using the R word instead of the F word? What about repentance? What about consequences? What about people who did criminal acts, horrific criminal acts, and paying for causing this kind of trauma and harm to an innocent child? How about that? Let's start with that. Instead of just running to forgiveness. Well, what about forgiveness?
We live in a really weird time right now where anything goes. And you know that in society, anything is okay. If it feels good, do it. If it sounds good, say it. Just do your own thing, blah, blah, blah. And we are expected, all of us, to forgive everybody for anything. And this is a case right here. Again, what about forgiveness? Well, it doesn't flush, it doesn't work, and that's not what was intended by God when he used the forgiveness word.
Not at all.
Not at all. There is an action that goes with forgiveness. There is a reason we forgive. There is a time and place that we forgive. There is a way.
And there's a
that
prerequisite of
there is
repentance.
Exactly right.
To receive forgiveness.
It involves repentance. And that's got to be probably the most misused, misunderstood word right now in all of not just Christendom, but I think in society as a whole.
Yeah.
Is quick to shoot out the word forgive, just forgive, and look how wonderful this person is. Their child was killed by a drunk driver and they forgave right away. This child was murdered by someone who went mentally insane for the moment. Just forgive. You have to forgive to heal.
Isn't it so beautiful? We romanticize this notion of forgiveness.
We do.
And we talked about this on our episode with the plain people. which was excellent because we talked about Amish Grace, the movie Amish
Right.
Grace, for the shooting in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And, they Hollywoodized this shooting to romanticize this notion of forgiveness, and how wonderful that, they just forgave the shooter, and the Amish community came together, and now all of a sudden there's going to be this.
It's all great.
Everything's going to be great again. And then we talked to our friends who know some of the victims of that shooting. And today still, they're not okay. Right. They're not doing well.
Of course
they're not functioning well.
Of course
they're not doing
not.
well. Forgiveness is not this romantic idea, and that shouldn't be our first default go-to when something like this happens.
And it is
should be the last thing we talk about.
Laid on us so heavy that we feel this heavy burden of guilt if we're not this super forgiving person right away, when we shouldn't even have that burden put on us. And it just, I think, just adds to what we're feeling.
I recently did a training, and I told a little bit about our story, and was talking about just the kind of the mechanics of how abusers think and how they get their victims and how callous they are, and just this lack of conscience. And we got to the Q&A part, and the very first question that was asked was, have you forgiven your father?
I knew that would be it. I knew it. Yeah.
And that's so typical when I go and speak places or do trainings. That question almost always 100% of the time comes up. And typically it's the first question that's asked. Right. It's amazing to me that that's the first thing that comes to the mind. Not, how are your dad's victims doing? Right. That's not asked.
No, it's not.
Usually it's not even a question that's asked at all.
I think people think, okay, so this happened. Put it behind you. It's not going to happen again. Put it behind you. Move on. That's it.
Because that's what God is all about.
That's not how it works, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah, right.
Okay, the next and last comment that we wanted to address, mandated reporting laws are man's law. What about following God's prescription for the offended party to go to the sinner first? I want to do a whole episode on this whole Matthew 18 approach. Matthew 18, going to the person who sinned against you. If they fail to repent, bringing 2 or 3 witnesses. If they fail to repent, bring them before the whole church. That is not talking about oppression, criminal activity, abuse, murder. It's not talking about that. This is talking about if somebody offends you, if somebody sins against you, kind of what are classified as some of the minor sins, then you go and you talk to that person. Nowhere in Scripture is it prescribed for somebody to go to an abuser or an oppressor and to sit down and have coffee and chat about what happened. Nowhere. And it's interesting. Matthew 18 begins by Jesus saying, anybody who would cause one of my little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for them to have a large millstone tied around their neck and to be drowned into the depths of the sea.
That's pretty strong language, by the way.
People don't talk about that.
Pretty strong language that Jesus used.
Right, and they don't talk about that. They default to the other part of Matthew 18 that says, you go and you confront the person who sinned against you. And it's almost like this little nice, soft,
I
conversation.
I think of that more as the busybody who's flapping her tongue or his tongue.
Sure.
Go talk to them. Tell them to keep
knock it off.
Yeah, knock it off. Stop it. You're causing trouble. If they don't act out right, then after that, then you go and you bring some witnesses with you. Not if somebody, I'll use the example you used, murder somebody.
Yeah, it's an intentional act to harm or kill somebody.
Yeah. You don't go sit and talk with them and say, no, I hope you won't go do this again.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And abuse, in the cases of abuse, That doesn't work.
No.
We know
and
that.
it never will, and it's not
no,
supposed to.
No.
That's not
No.
what Matthew 18 is about.
I-
But I'd
I-
love to do a whole episode on that because it's one
I
of
think
the most
that would be
misused.
good, Jimmy, because along with that is tied in this whole we must forgive thing. And I think it would be great
Yeah.
to explore that more.
Yeah. So here are some key points, key takeaways. Failure to report is a very serious crime. It really is. People can and they should be prosecuted for failing to report. I am
I agree.
100% behind the Midland Police Department.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
I wish more police departments would do their job and arrest people and press charges for failure to report. I think they need to make examples out of people not using the law to strong-arm people, but using the law the way it was written and intended to show that you're not going to get away with hiding and covering up this crime.
Had we not reported your dad when we did, that whole case could have been messed up too.
It could have.
Everything could have been
absolutely.
messed up simply because we didn't go report when we did. I've thought about that so
I know.
much. There are so many loopholes in the law that the more time goes on, the more chance there is for those loopholes to come into play.
Yeah.
That could have turned out so differently.
Well,
That's
it
just
would
one
have turned out
example.
differently.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
example. Right.
Yeah, I mean, people can and they should be prosecuted for failing to report.
Absolutely.
Another point is just that precious time is lost to gather evidence when people fail to
right.
report.
Yeah.
We are not investigators.
No.
And this is the other thing that blows my mind, that Jared Lee, the superintendent at Midland Christian, told other people, you should look into this and investigate this. Who in their right mind
Right.
would say, I've got the tools on my belt to do that.
Yeah.
I'll look right into it, boss.
Oh boy,
I don't know about
I don't
you.
know. That's something
I didn't want to investigate.
No. Oh no.
I'm not an investigator.
No.
I don't know what I'm
Report
doing.
And let the law take it
Right.
into their hands. Exactly right.
Yeah, we lose precious time
Yeah.
to gather evidence when
Right.
people fail to report. We're not investigators. Another point, the message to the victims clearly is, you don't matter. This little ninth grader,
Horrific. It's horrific.
when he went, and I can't imagine the courage that it took for him to report this the day after it happened. It's embarrassing. It's awful. It's something that, trust me, as a male, you're not going to march right into the office and be like, do you want to hear what they did to me? Like, this kid would have felt such
What
shame and
happened to
embarrassment.
him is life-changing, life-altering.
Absolutely.
Life-altering. It's a trauma that I think he will need help for quite a while
Yeah.
to work through the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a clear message to the victims. You clearly don't matter. Another thing is trying to make the school look good, and they're trying to make the school look good. It actually made it look much worse. If you look up
terrible.
Midland Christian, look at the Google reviews that are pouring in. Lots of 1-star reviews from people who have no association with the school. And that's what you attract when you do
I'm going to
these
say
cover-ups.
one thing, and I didn't discuss it with you prior, but I always think this: follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. People don't like to shine a dark light on an institution because they're funded a lot by, it takes funding for that.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I do know that administrators get paid quite well. It's not a little, piddly salary that they get. We're talking about high paid personnel here. And in order to keep that pristine image of this Christian school, they would not want this light to be shown on that
And it's now shining
now
very bright nationally.
Oh, yeah.
There's a national
Oh, yeah.
spotlight on this school.
And in their
will be for a long time.
in their attempt to hide that incident, they have done a big boo-boo there, because they're But you can probably follow the money and see that has a lot to do with it.
And that's another point. Funding is going to be a major issue after a cover-up of this size. After 5 of your people in the administration have been arrested. Funding is going to be an issue. There will be people who pull their money. I can guarantee that.
Well, I think those 5 should be booted out, and
they very well
and they probably
could
will
be.
Yeah, they probably will be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't bounce back from something like this.
Nope. So I mean, another point. Hopefully this is going to set a precedent for mandated reporters. There will be consequences, and these are some of the consequences that I see coming down the pike for this school in particular. Number one, these 5 officials have an absolute terrible reputation now, period.
Right.
There will be defenders. There will be people in their corner and people that think that they're being falsely accused and this was a witch hunt and, blah, 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 blah. But
you know what? Let me stop there, though. It's not about them.
It
was about this student who was abused. This isn't about them. It's about what they didn't do. They didn't do what was moral and just. 2 things they did not do. So it's not, this whole thing has been twisted. It's about, what about this student who was abused and got no help?
But that's what
and I know.
People will rally around them and they'll make it about them, how they're being falsely accused and people are gossiping about them, on and on and on and on.
They won't have that big of a following.
But the point is, overall, generally, these 5 officials have and will have a terrible reputation for a very long time. As they should. Number 2, they were, another consequence, they were already charged with a crime, and they'll likely carry a criminal record for a long time. I don't think these charges are going away.
No.
Number 3, the school's reputation is going down the drain on a national level. As I mentioned, look at the Google reviews that people are leaving, and people like you and me, you listeners, people who've never heard about this school, now you have.
It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, really, really bad, because then you wonder what else was hidden, what else goes on in that school.
And that's a fair question.
It is a fair question.
That's a fair question.
It is a fair question.
Number 4, the church associated with the school will have a tarnished reputation for a very, very long time.
That's sad. Yeah.
And they probably... My guess is the church had nothing to do with this, and they probably didn't even know about it.
Probably didn't. Right. They were trying to solve this all on their own.
Yeah.
By hiding it.
And then the 5th and final point, this consequence I think is really important. In fact, it's the most important. Like you said, the victim sadly faces the harshest consequences out of everybody. His life will never be the same again. His level of trust in others will be forever tarnished. The shame that he carries will be with him for a very, very long time.
It's awful when you stop and think about it. When that was a plea for help, when he went and told, and to be denied that help, to have that brushed under, hushed. I can't imagine what he is thinking.
Yeah, it's terrible. So, I mean, I guess the key takeaway is for mandated reporters, report. Right. There is no excuse in 2022. There is literally not one excuse that I can think of for a mandated reporter not to report abuse. This is the kind of nonsense that does carry consequences, and we're going to stick with this story. I'm very vested in this story. I was told by reporters that or asked if they could call me for follow-up. They're going to keep covering this story.
Good. I'm glad.
And I'm very vested in this story, and I'm really interested.
I think we need to follow this through, all of us, and see where this ends.
There are consequences to not reporting.
What happens, right.
It's not a joke. Abuse is not a joke.
It's not.
So to the mandated reporters, report. For those of you, everybody else, you are classified as a permissive reporter, which means you have permission to report even if you're not mandated to do so.
Right.
Anybody can report
Right.
anything that we see. Report.
We can
Report.
and we should. That's
Yes.
all.
Well, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the rewards our patrons receive.